All right. Could I have your name and your date of birth and place where you were born?
Oh, yeah, sure. Lee Stoltzfuss is my name. I was born October 1954, and I was born close to Honeybrook in Chester County.
My name is Clarke Hess, and I was born June 16th, 1954, in Lebanon, Pennsylvania.
And Clarke, who were your parents' names?
Walter and Ruth Hess.
And how about other siblings?
I have 8 siblings. You want their names, or?
Sure.
That's a lot of siblings.
My oldest sibling was is W. Roy Hess. Next is Robert L. Hess, followed by John P. Hess, followed by James Lee Hess, followed by C. Richard Hess, followed by Ruth Ann, and then Earl K., and myself and my twin sister, Cheryl.
Spoken like a real genealogist.
Yeah, right.
And Lee?
Okay, I forget what the question is now. Oh, siblings. Is that it? Okay, well, actually, it's very similar to Clarke's, just different names. My parents had 9 children. His had 8. 9. And I'm in a multiple birth, just like he is in a multiple birth. I'm in a set of triplets, just like he is in a set of twins. And we triplets were born when my mom was in her 40s, just like he and his sister were born when she was...
My mother was not quite 39.
Yeah. So we're both the last in our multiple births. So I don't know if I can remember all the names of my siblings, but they're Shirley Stoltzfuss, Jay Stoltzfuss, Mary Law Stoltzfuss, Virginia Stoltzfuss, Calvin Stoltzfuss, and then the 3 of us, the triplets, are Lee, Larry, and Linda. They were going to name us Esther, Chester, and Lester, but they changed it to Lee, Larry, and Linda, for which I will be forever grateful that they changed their name to that.
So my next question is why you're both here. Have either of you been married, or?
The answer is no. No.
But
Never.
both of you have been together a long time, right?
We have, yeah. It's, I guess it depends on when you start counting. We don't really have an anniversary because we were friends before we became partners. So we can't really have an official anniversary date, unlike some people.
We've been together almost 26 years.
Yeah. It's been that long. Yeah. We knew each other for a while before we started living together. So.
And neither of you have any children, right?
That's right.
How long have you been living in this town?
I moved to Littis in 1985 when I bought this property. I didn't move into this property, I moved to a temporary housing in town.
Yeah, I've been here that same amount of time. We're actually living in Clarke's family's homestead. It was built by his family in the 1740s. They were Mennonite farmers, farm family. And it was in his family till the 1920s, this farm. I left the family, and then he purchased it in 85. Started restoring it. It took about 2 years to restore it. Meanwhile, my brother and I were living in the summer kitchen, which is right across from the patio here. And then after about 2 years of being restored, he moved into the big house. And then shortly after that, I moved in the big house too. So it's been a long time, yeah.
And this house is kind of unique. It's, besides being a family house, almost everything in it is period or from your family.
Pretty much. I've been collecting antiques since I was 12, so it's kind of an obsession of mine.
Clarke is very modest, but he's actually the one of the leading historians of Mennonite material culture here in Lancaster County. One of the leading historians of Mennonite folk life in Lancaster County, Mennonite history, and has been, well, he wrote authored a book called Mennonite Arts about Mennonite antiques So this house is sort of a museum of Lancaster County and Mennonite history. And I often refer to it as the Hans Herr House North. The Hans Herr House, of course, is the oldest house in Lancaster County, built in, I guess, what, about 1710? 1719. And this house, or at least the first floor, is built in the 1740s, and actually predates the town of Lidditz. So it's sort of like living in a museum, really. Sort of like living in a museum of Mennonite and Lancaster County history.
So you both have deep Lancaster County roots.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Mine are Amish and his are Mennonites. And Amish and Mennonites never married, so I guess we're still following that tradition. I don't know.
I have Mennonite, primarily Mennonite ancestry, but I do have a little Lutheran and Reformed, and some Church of the Brethren also.
Just to spice it up a
Just,
little.
yeah, right. For variety.
Yeah, my ancestry is all Amish. My father was from Lancaster County Amish, and my mother was from Somerset County Amish. So I always say I have a hybrid vigor, an East Coast to West Coast thing going on there because of that. But I don't know if it's true or not. But both my parents had been Amish till they were teenagers. And then they decided they wanted to have cars and electricity, so they joined the Beach Amish. And so I grew up Mennonite instead of growing up Amish, which I'm glad for. I think I'd make a very good Amishman for some reason.
And where did you grow up?
In Morgantown area. My father helped to start Rockville Mennonite Church, which is an offshoot of Conestoga Mennonite Church. So I grew up in the Morgantown, Honeybrook area, which is like an ancestral area for the Amish community there. It's like an Amish stronghold, that whole eastern end of the Conestoga Valley, I guess you'd say.
And when did you move here then?
I had been living in Harrisburg teaching school for a while, and then I moved back to Lancaster.
And Clarke, where did you grow up?
My family lived on a farm in Lebanon County till I was 5, and then we moved to Manheim Township, Lancaster County. But all of my ancestors lived here in the county. My family had only lived out of the county from 1943 to 1960. So I was born in Lebanon as a result.
Oh, there goes the clock. We got too many noisy clocks around here. That's another experience that we share, in addition to having the same number of siblings, is that we both grew up on the farm and both moved off just when the hard work was about to begin. This is the lucky thing. I was 12 when we moved off, but he moved off earlier. He moved off when he was 5, so we became suburban kids after being farm kids. So you didn't really have any hard work to do.
Nope.
Because you were 5. So I just had a little bit of hard work, and then became a suburban kid.
So there's lots of different kinds of Mennonites. Can you just kind of each describe what how conservative of a background you came from, or what the...
Yeah. My family was Lancaster Conference. We were members at Metzler's Mennonite Church near Brownstown. Then we moved to Lebanon County and still attended church there. And after we moved to Lancaster, we were about a half a mile from Neffsville Mennonite Church. So we started attending there, and I was baptized there. And Metzler's was Lancaster Conference, which was fairly conservative in the 50s and even early 60s. My siblings, being raised in Lebanon County, and not with many Mennonite friends, were a little less conservative. So the Neffsville at that time was Ohio and Eastern Conference, which was a more liberal group. So that suited us better in the 60s.
So in general, like, did your mother wear a covering?
Yes,
or?
she did. My brother wore a covering till 1970 maybe, something like that.
And were they black bumper or anything
No,
like
no.
that? Okay.
Lancaster Conference isn't black bumper. That's the Martinite.
So everyone had cars.
Yes.
No one was
We
driving
had
a buggy.
cars, and we had a TV, even though Lancaster Conference wasn't supposed to have.
Was it in a
TV.
closet or something like that? A door?
No, but one of my older brothers bought one in 1954, the year I was born. He wasn't a church member, so he could have a TV.
And how about you?
Well, sort of similar. My grandfather, my father's father, started a group of Amish Mennonites at Weavertown, which is today the Weavertown Amish Mennonite Church. When they first started, they referred to themselves as the John A's after my grandfather. And then they became, that was a group that today, they have black cars, but they have electricity. I don't think they have radios anymore, no televisions. But my father and mother didn't stay with that group. They became the more liberal Mennonites. So they joined, like it said, Conestoga, which is the Atlantic Conference.
Yeah, was Ohio and
Was
Eastern
Atlantic.
Coastal.
But over the years, they became progressively more liberal as far as their clothing. My mother wore a covering up until her old age.
99,
Yeah, she's
about,
now 100.
and she just stopped wearing.
Yeah. So, grew up in a Mennonite church where the women would have been wearing coverings, the men would have been wearing plain suits. Later on, would have just worn regular jackets with no ties. Although now those churches, of course, are just like any other denomination as far as their appearance and their dress and so forth. Yeah.
My father never wore a plain suit, and he had a radio in his car as a teenager, which wasn't allowed either. But as a child, my church, Metzler's, the men sat on the right and the women sat on the left. That's the way it was still done. That's changed since then, except among the old orders, they still hold to that arrangement.
And so, more recently, what's been your church journey? Where do you still attend church?
Well, when people ask me that question, I say we live in a church, so we don't go to church actually. This house actually used to be a church building because when Clarke's Hess ancestors lived here, it wasn't a church building, so they actually met here. So we're continuing that tradition. So this is now the Hess Stoltzfuss Mennonite Church or something. I don't know what I refer to myself as Neo-Amish because I identify, we both identify very much with the history of the Plain people and their folk culture and their folk ways. We're interested in the food, the architecture, the decorative arts, the fun stuff, but not so much the politics and the theology. Although I'm very interested in the fact that a lot of the theology tends to be very liberal, the separation of church and state, being a conscientious objector, being opposed to war. That has always been interesting to me, politically as well as religiously. So I guess we're probably more interested in Mennonite history than most Mennonites. I'm more interested. I'm more interested in Amish history than any of my brothers and sisters. More interested in my family history than any of my brothers and sisters. So we're still very much Mennonite. I always say being Mennonite is a lot like being Jewish. It's a cultural thing and an ethnic thing as well as a religious thing. So that's what we identify with, our folk culture and our heritage. And like being Jewish, you can kind of pick and choose what works for you. So the food and the architecture works real well for us. Although, of course, now there are so many progressive Mennonite churches that it would be very easy for us to go to a Mennonite church, community Mennonite. But we simply haven't chosen to do that yet. So.
As far as, I'm losing my train of thought here. So we'll go on to another subject if it comes back to me. How about schooling for each of you? Where you went to school and...
I was 5 going on 6 when we moved to the county, so I should have been in kindergarten, but they didn't have kindergarten in Lebanon County, at least not in the district I was in. So I skipped kindergarten and I started first grade at M.J. Brecht in Manheim Township and went through all 12 years in the township. And I didn't go to college. I considered it, but went into my family business instead.
And so, what business? What was your occupation?
Building business. Initially, I started working when I was 11, Saturdays and summers, cleaning up and doing what a kid could do, whitewashing the basement walls. We used to always do that as a standard. And when I was 14, I got working papers. And I was hired by my family's business at 50 cents an hour. And I still have the distinction of having been the lowest paid employee our company has ever had. And when I started working full-time, I worked on my father's crew. We do framing and roofing and finish work. We do the whole shebang back then. And then I went to installing kitchens, and I did that for 8-9 years. And then I became a finishing supervisor. And that's what I do primarily now. So I order materials and work with customers and check out houses and apartments in the final stages, finishing stages. That's all I've never applied for a job in my life.
Never filled out a job
I've
application.
only ever had one employer.
Never had to fill out a resume.
No.
It's Hess Home Builders is the name of the company. It's his brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews. They build apartment buildings and townhouses and stuff like that.
And how about you, Lee?
Well, I'm a product of Mennonite schools. I spent a lifetime in Mennonite schools, unlike Clarke, who's a product of public schools. Went to Lancaster Mennonite, first of all, went to Conestoga Christian School, which is right across the street from Conestoga Mennonite Church in Morgantown. The kind of school where in 10th grade there were about 7 kids, and of course 3 of them were we 3 triplets, you know. So it wasn't a one-room schoolhouse then, but it was 2 grades in one room often. So I went from Conestoga Mennonite to Lancaster Mennonite, graduated from Lancaster Mennonite, went from Lancaster Mennonite to the Mennonite College out in Indiana, Goshen, and then from there went to Shippensburg, where I graduated with a degree in education. So yeah, I spent a lot of time in Mennonite schools, Mennonite churches, which for me was a good thing because I think it protected people, those schools. You know, I didn't see any bullying, for example, in the schools. It was okay to be eccentric, although I wasn't eccentric. I was kind of the academic, studious one, sort of guy. So it was okay to be academic and studious and not play sports and you wouldn't be bullied for it because these were your Mennonite friends and you all knew each other and there weren't that many students, and so I feel that was a good thing for me. You know, you weren't when you were in high school, since it was Mennonite school, it was assumed you weren't going to be thinking about sexual things because that's what no one was supposed to be. You know, so it was easier to be gay and I think, even though I wasn't out then or wasn't totally aware of my sexuality, it was easier for me in Mennonite school than I think it may have been elsewhere.
And how about then your work life?
My work life is much more checkered than his. Most of my time in the past while has been I've been dealing in antiquarian books, buying and selling rare books, sort of like the ones behind us. Before that, I had a landscaping business where I specialized in doing period gardens for people with historic houses. I only taught 6th grade for 1 year and realized it wasn't for me. I taught up actually in Harrisburg, Central Dauphin School District. And then after that, moved here to Lancaster County, where I got involved in those businesses.
And you're still doing the book selling and all that?
I consider myself semi-retired now. You know, I consider myself semi-retired.
I think I know the answer to this, but maybe some of the people... Have either of you been in the military?
The answer is no. Growing up in Mennonite churches, of course, we were able to declare ourselves as conscientious objectors. So.
And then we lead into what I was thinking about before. With all your interests, what other avocations or memberships and organizations have you been in? Like, I know you've done a lot of historical stuff.
Yeah.
It's a long list for him.
I think so.
Belong to a couple dozen historical organizations, but I was on the board of the Lancaster Mennonite Historical Society for 30 years, until 2 years ago I finally declined the term. I was also on the board of the Historic Preservation Trust of Lancaster County for 15 years all told. And I still serve on a committee, and I'm still on committees at the Mennonite Historical Society. I was chairman of their museum committee, and I oversaw development and installation of their current exhibit. And I'm still on their genealogy committee, which of course is something I've been interested in since I was a kid. I'm chairman of the administration committee at the Hans Herr House, because I'm quite interested in early architecture and always have been. I served 9 years on the board of Landis Valley Museum Associates, and currently I'm on the board of the Historical Society of Cocalico Valley, and I'm on the board of the Manheim Township Historical Society, of which I was a founding member, and we're currently trying to restore the Stoner House in Overlook Park that I've been involved in trying to stave off demolition for about a dozen years now.
Successfully.
Yeah,
far.
finally successfully at last. And I'm also involved in a cemetery organization we started 25 years ago to preserve the Hans Hess, the immigrant ancestor, immigrated to south of Willow Street in 1717, died in 1733, and we preserved that cemetery and built a stone wall around it and such. And we're both members of the American Folk Art Society, which is a collectors group of 60 people nationwide. And we're the first gay couple to be members of that organization. Actually, they changed their bylaws the other year to accommodate Lee.
I didn't ask them to, they volunteered. I just showed up with Clarke at the first meeting, so here I am. And
It's mostly folk art collectors from a lot New England, but some from the Midwest and California.
it was kind of an intimidating group.
Around.
Yeah. It was a little bit intimidating for me to go there because it's kind of a high-powered group. It's a group where they invite you to join. And they had been through the house on a tour. I often co-host tours like that. I'm not sure where it was that day. But they met Clarke and didn't meet me because I wasn't here. So they invited him to join, and of course, as a member, you're allowed to bring a guest. So I was the guest.
From the beginning.
Yeah, from the beginning. and so we were the first domestic partners. Since then, there's been two other guys who were domestic partners who were there. But of course, they were all very welcoming.
Yeah.
So there's no reason for me to be intimidated by them,
Yeah.
even though they are kind of a high-powered group of collectors. But I was a little intimidated to begin with. But
So were there any other organizations that you wanted to list, Clarke? I know you had quite a list. Like,
Heritage Center?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, I was on the board of the Heritage Center the last 6 weeks, or 6 years or so. And I was on their collections committee also, and was involved in the last year of the organization. Myself and the 2 other members went through the entire collection, reviewed and deaccessioned duplicate materials and such. But I had done an exhibit for them on the Lancaster Mennonites and their arts in 1999, and then they asked if I would do a book on the subject, which I did, titled Mennonite Arts, which came out in 2001, and that was published for the benefit of the Heritage Center. They received royalties from that. And when I was at Landis Valley, I chaired the Landis Valley Cookbook Committee, even though I'm not a cook.
Even though he
But it
doesn't
was
have
sort of
water.
it was very much on historic foodways. And that also came out in 2001, and we won a regional and a state award for that cookbook.
And he's the one that was. And where did you go pick up the award?
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. Picked up this cookbook award. Of course, he couldn't tell anyone he didn't know how to boil water, and he just gave it up for the group. I didn't tell anybody. I let them think he was a good cook.
And since then, I've done 2 small exhibits for the Historical Society of the Ocalico Valley. One on privy bags, and one on Ephrata Fructura.
well, and
I also did an exhibit in Canada in 1991 called Changes in Latitude at the Joseph Schneider House in Kitchener, Ontario.
And didn't you also do a Proctor book for the?
No,
Here-
I did
Oh,
not
what?
do a Fructor book.
You just had some of your collection
Yeah.
in that.
Yeah. And my first exhibit was actually at Manheim Township Junior High. The librarian asked me to, if I was interested in doing an exhibit of old books. So I did. And some of my books still have the typed tags from that exhibit that my twin sister typed the labels for the exhibit.
And so, while Clarke's been doing all these things, what have you been doing, Lee?
Well, with those organizations, my history has been to be involved as a volunteer. I've been a volunteer at the Landis Valley Museum, where about 30 years ago, or no, 25, 26 years ago, I started a project called the Heirloom Seed Project to preserve historic varieties of food crops among the Pennsylvania Germans. And that project now has really grown by leaps and bounds. There are about 50 volunteers there and so forth. So I sort of volunteer at these organizations where he's involved. At the Heritage Center, I was involved in the print shop there, doing print shop stuff. And the same as at the Clarke Valley Historical Society, I was involved in their print shop. Because I'm interested in rare books, I'm also interested in historical printing.
And you helped mount the 2 exhibits
That's
there.
right, yeah. And also was involved at the Lidditz Museum, the Historical Society here in Lidditz. Published a couple things online, one involving the Lidditz Historical Society, a biography of John Foss, a possibly gay artist from Lidditz who was in Manhattan in the 20s and the 30s. And also did an online history of printing and publishing in Lancaster County called the Black Art History of Printing and Publishing in Lancaster County. Actually, it's an online exhibition of Clarke's books here behind us.
Some of them.
Some of the books, yep. So we tend to be involved in the same organizations. Although he's the expert and I just tag along.
So when did you each first realize you were LGBT, and how did you identify yourself?
I guess I'll start. Well, like I said, going to Mennonite schools, Mennonite high school was very easy. Not that I didn't need to identify yourself. It was very easy just to be academic, and that's what I did. But by the time I went to Goshen College, a Mennonite college in Indiana, I was more self-aware, and of course heard, as usual, that the gays are in the theater. So I got involved in the theater because I'd been involved in theater in high school, which of course is no surprise. And so that's when I came out, when I was involved in the theater there. Actually, in Shippensburg, now that I think of it. It was later than Goshen. Yeah, it was in Shippensburg. I transferred from Goshen to Shippensburg. Yeah. And things were never the same after that.
And how about you, Clarke?
Well, let's see. The first contact I had with gay friends or friends that I knew were gay was when a couple close high school friends went to Millersville, and I used to hang out at Millersville with them. And they had some parties where there were other gay people. And that was the first social contact I ever had. And I think as a teenager, I wasn't sure, I was confused somewhat.
So what time was this? What year, or how old were you?
That would have been starting in the summer of '72. I would have been 18.
And what was it like for you as a gay person then? What?
It was, in some respects, it was exciting, but it was also terribly stressful. I was very fearful for my family and my work and everything. There was a considerable period of time when I would not go into a bar. My friends would leave me in the car, parked in the street, and they'd go into the bar for 2 hours.
He was
and come back and get me.
He was shy. He was a shy boy.
So how many times did you do that?
Oh, a number of times.
Years?
No, not years, but a number of times. And even the first times I went in, there was an understanding that I would be back in the corner. And one of them would be there to watch over me.
And how old were you then? When you
I probably 20, 19 or 20. I mean, we could go to the shore in Jersey and they had 19-year-old drinking age back then. Mm-hmm. But Pennsylvania had 21. And I didn't go in many places before I was 21 in Pennsylvania.
And where would have been the first places you went locally?
The Fiddler in Lancaster.
And where was that in
Stevens
Lancaster?
House courtyard. It was a great place. Yeah.
Do you remember how many years that was around, or?
Oh,
I don't.
probably 74, 75, 76, 77, in that era.
Mm-hmm.
It's been quite a while that it wasn't. I think it was later a restaurant, Bird's Nest.
Right.
Does that still exist, or? Okay.
I don't think, but it would have been right down from like the intersection of Prince Street and King Street. That's
Yeah, it was
So it's
Wetter,
up on
Stevens' house.
Prince.
Wetter and
Yeah, it's the Stevens house.
Wetter and King,
Yeah.
West King.
And how about you, Lee?
Let's see, the first place, well, actually,
Well, what was your first contact like
oh,
with?
yes. Well, that would have been the theater at Shippensburg. The gays, of course, were involved in the theater at Shippensburg, so that was one of the reasons I joined. Although I did have a theater background a little bit. Then, after I left Shippensburg, I moved to Harrisburg, where I was teaching in the Central Dauphin School District. And so, of course, the first bar I went to there, first gay bar I went to, I guess, was the D-Gem along the river there. And I was very impressionable because the first guy that bought me a drink, I was with him for 6 months. So I was very, I was very easily impressed by someone buying me a drink. I guess I'm not sure what that was, but I was young and naive. And then I was in Harrisburg for several years, and then moved back to Lancaster.
What ways did you interact with other gays and lesbians back then?
Well, the bars, of course, were a big social place. That's where I remember meeting people. Till I moved to Lancaster. Well, even to Lancaster. Of course, you would have your small circles of friends, meeting homes and so forth. I was never involved in any other organizations until later on. The Lancaster Men's Potluck, of course, Brethren Mennonite Council, which is now Brethren LGBT. What is it now? Brethren Mennonite LGBT interests. That's what.
Well, why don't you kind of describe what that organization is, and
Sure.
either of you can chime in as far as its history.
Sure. I don't have a good history of it because we're not as involved as we had been in the past. It had been referred to as a BMC, Brethren Mennonite Council, which was basically an advocacy group for the LGBT community and the Mennonite Church.
Mennonite and Church of the Brethren.
That's right, Church of the Brethren, which is sort of a cousin group. So we had been fairly involved. I was.
And what time period? Just to...
This would have been in the 80s, I guess. I was always kind of geeky, so my computer skills were pretty good, so I did their first website for them. And we hosted the board of directors here every once in a while, would have potlucks and so forth for them, and that sort of thing. We aren't really that involved now. I guess we aren't really that involved with LGBT groups, and probably less so now than in the past, maybe because the whole community is so integrated that, I don't know, maybe we feel less of a need to be involved with LGBT groups, but I'm not sure how that evolved, but it seems to be our evolution with all that. But we weren't involved with what was referred to as the BMC group.
And what region was that? Just local? Was it a national group or?
It's international now. Canada, and well, I guess not just Canada, the United States, wherever there are LGBT Mennonites, I guess. But most of the people we knew at that time were from the East Coast, some Canadians.
And so you were an advocacy group and also kind of a social group too? Support group?
Both, right,
Yeah.
right. Now there are several organizations who do that in the Mennonite Church, so that's just one of them. But that's the one that we were associated with, and that was the primary one at that time.
And it was like socially, you both potlucks and things like that is what you did, or?
Yeah, when the group would, when the board would meet in this area, we would host them occasionally. Phil Wanger, of course, was very active and still is, I think, with that group. So we worked with him with that group, and yeah, it was a very energetic group, and still is, and they're doing a lot of good work, I think.
Did you travel to other cities around that time
I
a
did.
lot, or you did?
A lot.
So what cities?
Well, we would travel to York, Reading, Harrisburg, locally, Atlantic City, Philly, Baltimore, New York City. It's
With his
pretty much.
ex. Not with me.
Hagerstown, Altland's Ranch.
And was it mostly like a weekend trip to go out to bars and things, or were you doing?
Well, in Atlantic City would be, you know, shore point, so we'd be spending some time there. New York, we'd be doing, you know, all sorts of things while we're out there. But Baltimore would be for the day or for the evening, tea dance on a Sunday afternoon. Oh, Washington, D.C., lost and found tea dance Sundays and that sort of thing.
So bars in this area, in the central Pennsylvania region, which ones do you remember? Which ones did you go to? Or
Most of them.
Yeah, I'm trying to
Yeah.
think. Well, of course, Tally Ho and the Fiddler in Lancaster. York was, what was the name of the one on George Street? Used to call it the Monkey Bar.
14 Carat. Is
Is that what it was?
There was one poem. That,
I forget.
Reading was This Is It, was one of them.
He was no longer shy and timid, but he was well behaved.
did he buy you a drink?
Well, we were friends before we became domestic partners. So, for that reason, you know, we don't have a meeting date or a first date or any of that stuff.
The Railroad House in Marietta was a favorite of my group.
Can you explain what tea dances were? What
Tea
was it?
dances
Yes.
were afternoon dances,
Afternoon, okay.
generally Sundays, I think.
I think so.
When you first came out, how did that impact your work life at that time? You mentioned some of your fears, or how out were you, I guess I should say.
I wasn't very out. I went to fairly great lengths to hide my sexuality.
Although he didn't fool
'Cause
anybody.
Well, probably not, but it's not. There are not many people in construction that are gay. At least I haven't met them over the years. So it's not one of the professions like hairdresser
That's a
or even
stereotype, but-
teaching, or museum antique dealing, where there's a large population of gay people. So a lot of people aren't that tolerant because they're not exposed to it. So I wasn't very out early on.
Has that changed over time?
Yes.
We're doing an interview.
Gradually. It's changed gradually, yes. But I'm still not totally out to everyone.
Wow.
There's some people that wouldn't be comfortable with it. And, you know, it's simply something that isn't discussed. I never discussed it with my parents. Certainly they knew, but they didn't want to discuss it, and I didn't want to discuss it, so we didn't.
And how about brothers and sisters?
Never been discussed. They're well aware of it because of my health situation.
Yeah,
I know.
They know we've traveled together on vacation for years and years and years, so you
Yeah.
know, there are no surprises. You know, over the years, people who know me being associated with him, you know, they assume the correct information. So that's kind of way it's been for both of us with a lot of our coming out processes. You know, we just live our lives. You know, our house has always been open, and a lot of people have asked to have tours through here. You know, historical societies or garden tours or family groups. And, you know, when you're missionaries and Mennonites, you just have to say yes to those tours. You have to open your doors. So, yeah, we just live our lives, and you know, people aren't dumb. They know the truth, and so that's kind of the way we've done it. I've been pretty much the same way with my family. Never sat down with my family and had the discussion with Sis, saying, "Oh, by the way, I'm gay," but over the years, they didn't know the truth, and that's just kind of the way it's been. And
Yeah, your family is different
yeah,
because of Larry and
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And what can you kind of say what you mean by that?
Oh, Larry's my brother, my triplet brother, who's also gay, who lives next door with his partner. Bernie, who is British and is here 6 months out of the year, and then goes back to England, 6 months. So all that kind of confuses people. It's like early on, it was like, who's gay, or are they all gay? Is everybody gay? That sort of thing. But
Bernie has always attended your family
Yeah.
function, and I haven't, so
he's
they
attended.
all know.
Yeah.
Bernie.
Clarke has attended more of my family functions in the past.
In recent years, yeah.
Although I continue not to attend many of his family functions because it's so focused
We
on...
don't have many
That's true.
anymore.
His brothers are all interested in things I'm not interested in. They're all interested in hunting and trucks and the company and cars, and I'm not interested in any of that stuff. So I figure it would be more work than pleasure to attend his family functions. So I chose not to, I guess. But over the years that changes, and we all know each other, and things get much easier over the years.
For your social life, how about coming out or being out or not being out? How's that affected?
Well, lately we actually socialize less with gay and lesbian people than I think we did in the past. It seems, maybe it's because
Because we're more open. We can be more open.
Yeah. And maybe it's because society is so integrated now anyway that, we don't need the gay ghettos like we did in the past. So we have our close circle of friends that we socialize with. We'll have them here, once or twice during the year. But you kind of get set in your ways, and so we tend to socialize more with straight people, I guess, than LGBT people, it seems. I'm not quite sure how that happened. But, with all the historical organizations he's involved in, and, although of course it's mixed, it's a mixture.
And are you open with all those people?
Yeah. Because, when they're here, it's obvious what the situation is, and for some of them, for numerous people, we haven't sat down and said we're gay and we've been gay this long, and we started seeing each other, but we just live our lives, and they know the truth, and we know the truth, and we know that they know the truth, and that's kind of the way it works a lot of times.
So, non-issue.
Yeah, it's pretty much a non-issue.
Now, over the years, I know both of you have been involved in some of the civil and political things that have happened in Lancaster, even though you haven't been out, as someone might say.
Yeah.
Can you talk about any of those things? What first got you involved in anything like that?
Well, I've always referred to myself as an accidental activist. I haven't really been an activist, but I've typed fast. I went to these Mennonite schools, and they taught you typing. And they didn't realize when they were teaching me typing that they were going to turn me into a computer geek and a gay activist. But that's what they did. Because I typed fast, I was good with computers, so I did the BMC website. And actually I did a website for the Allies at F&M years ago when Windows 95 just came out. And I was really impressed with Windows 95. And I said, you Allies should have a website. So they said, okay, so I did it for them. The only other thing I did was with Mary Merriman. I guess it was in '91. The KKK came to town. Her memory's better than mine, so should be telling this story. So one of the targets was the gay community. So that kind of upset me. So I said, well, we should do something about this. Why are they targeting the gay community? So we planned to do a full-page ad, which was going to appear in the Lancaster newspapers the day after the KKK came to town, and I contacted Mary Merriman, and she assisted me with this. I believe she was involved with MCC Church at the time, pastor of MCC Church at the time. We contacted some of her friends, did a little fund drive saying, help us get a full-page ad. So we did. We got a full-page ad that ran in the newspaper the day after the KKK came to this town. The ad was just a very simple thank you to the Lancaster community for supporting the LGBT community. That's all it was. It was a really simple, nicely designed.
I thought it had a red rose on it.
Had a red rose.
Oh, that's right.
Right? We read in the morning paper and the evening paper. Of course, it was anonymous. So it made a real furor.
Because as far as I know, that was the first time the word gay appeared in an ad in the
Was it?
paper.
Well,
As far as I know. I know it wasn't in the classifieds.
No, it wasn't that.
we were ahead of our time. We didn't even know it. So, of course, that infuriated a lot of people. So what they did in their fury was, I believe it was the merchandiser. Someone took out, was it an ad or a flyer in the merchandiser, which is...
Their full-page ad.
Yeah.
Full-page
Some
ad.
merchandise, not
Right.
comparable.
Yeah. Which is a monthly,
Weekly.
or a weekly, like shopping news sort of newspaper. Basically taking my design and my text and reversing it to be anti-gay. But actually, I was very flattered because they copied my design and text identically. I said, what did I say? Imitation is the best compliment or something. So, unfortunately, I didn't lose them, but I couldn't find one. Otherwise, I'd have one. So, my activism has been very accidental because I'm not an activist. I just
You're one of
let it
those
happen.
peaceful Mennonites.
I am
Until
peaceful.
you get...
That's
I'm
right.
very peaceful.
Mine has been minimal, certainly in Lancaster area. I did march in a gay rights march in D.C. about 1980 or 81, I think. There was a big one down there.
And what was that like?
That was quite a festival, if you might say, because people flew in from all over the country. I had friends in D.C. and I know they had people sleeping on the floor and on the sofas and the armchairs and everything, trying to house all these people. But it was quite an experience.
And you wore a black armband in high school for something. I forgot
That
what
had
that
nothing to do with. That was the Kent State shooting.
was. Okay. First active, radical activism. There's something.
Leftist.
Leftist. No, we're not leftist.
To this day, I still think it kept me out of the National Honor Society. Yeah.
So, how aware were you of other local LGBT efforts over the years?
Well, fairly aware, I guess, because of the newsletters and the Philadelphia newspapers, whatever they were, I forget now. So even before cyberspace, we were fairly well informed because even though it's Lancaster County, it's not really the provinces.
I just thought of something I should mention. When I was 1975, I would have been just turning 21. One day I was driving up Centerville Road towards Centerville, and I got to the traffic light, and Barry Weaver had his beauty salon on the corner, on the southwest corner, and there was a big banner across the front, Gay Pride, June 1975. And I often wished I had taken a photo of it, but I didn't. But I'm sure it was covered in Lancaster newspapers. So if you go to June 1975, I'm sure you'll find something about that. But that, to me, was so shocking to see.
Now, did you know
In
him
Centerville.
at that time?
No, I didn't.
Did you
and I
introduce
never
yourself?
really learned to know him. Somebody pointed him out to me in a bar somewhere, and I think he passed away some years ago. But he was very outspoken. I mean, and I understood his business suffered because of that.
Are there any other things you remember about him or things
No,
he did?
other than he published the Gay Era newsletter, which was just a sheet, I think, as I recall. And they used to have it in the bars and I'd see it, but I was living at home back then, so I never took copies home. So as a result, I don't have any. But I've often hoped that somebody saved an archive. He worked in that paper with, I think, one or two other fellows. I don't know who they were, but maybe they're still around and hopefully have an archive.
And you said his name was Barry?
Barry Weaver.
He did. I seem to remember that he passed away some years
Yeah.
back.
Sorry for
No, that's
interjecting that.
perfect. That's wonderful. Did you have any other things you were thinking about as far as...
I guess I don't have any specific memories to add to that.
I would go to some gay pride celebrations in Philly and
what years?
Washington.
Like in the 70s?
In the late 70s, early 80s. And I went once to the Reading Picnic, which was, I guess, an annual event over there in the Wooded Grove. It was a huge affair. I
You
think
should
it's,
take a
I'm
break,
pretty
Mark.
sure it's died out, but
What changes have you seen during...
Seen a lot of good changes. People being informed, family, friends, relatives being informed. Of course, being more informed means they're more open to us. Yeah, the changes are good. That's what I've seen. Bad changes, negative changes. What have you
I
seen?
remember thinking that we were making great strides as a community until AIDS arrived.
Yeah,
And that I felt that that was a real setback
yeah.
socially in terms of acceptance from the broader population.
Right.
I also remember the first time I heard talked about was at the railroad house.
Oh, okay.
And somebody was talking about AIDS, and they said they think it's a government conspiracy to kill gay people. That was early on. That's what some people believe.
Like what
Of course,
year?
well, that was probably '83, I think, when it first started.
First started.
At that point, they had no idea how it was spread, you know. And people said, maybe it's poppers. In the bars, a lot of people use poppers in the dance floor. And other people had other theories. But the conspiracy theory was pretty widespread. And interestingly enough, the black population adopted that later. They said the same thing.
Well, and how about... That's still a while back, even though it doesn't seem that... What about change since then, though?
Oh, since then, well, certainly, I mean, much broader acceptance. I know they have a group of supporting group here at Warwick High School for gays, yeah, and that sort of thing didn't exist when we were in school. I mean, it would have been driven out of the school.
What do you think made those changes?
Information,
Yeah, information.
access to
Yeah.
information. So I
And
would say
some
so.
of that is simply more gay people being out of the closet and people knowing. I mean, so many people nowadays have relatives. I have a nephew that's gay. You know, many people have relatives that are gay, and they, you know, realize it and realize there's nothing wrong with those people and can finally accept them. And religion has moderated as well, most denominations, and that's huge.
Now, you said earlier that you've never really spoken directly with your family.
No.
Your nephew, has he, like when you say you have a gay?
Well, he and his partner have been here twice. So,
And what about the
but
rest of the family?
actually, interestingly enough, growing up, I always assumed he'd be gay from, when he was that small. And I kept my distance from him because I didn't want to be blamed for influencing, my nephew in a negative manner, which is unfortunate, but that's, the way it was.
So what's his relationship with his parents? Is that
Oh, fine. Yeah. Yep. Totally accepting his family. And his older brother is now my business partner. So he's fine with me.
Is the nephew involved in the family business or anything?
No,
Or-
no.
Okay.
He's a
Music.
music teacher.
Oh, one of those professions you mentioned.
That's a stereotype.
When he was a little child, he'd say, when he grows up, he wants to be an Arthur and a babysitter. An Arthur. Arthur and a babysitter.
And that clued you in, huh?
One of many things.
They used to have, he had a female cousins used to put on plays for the Thanksgiving dinner and the Christmas dinner. They'd have these elaborate, really cute, little kids plays. And he was always a director.
Are there other gay or lesbian relatives you have besides your
Besides
twin
my
brother?
I guess not. Let me think here for a minute. Well, actually, I have a step niece, I guess you would say, who lives nearby with her partner. And who else? I guess that's all that I know. Yeah.
What challenges do you think there still are locally for gays and lesbians?
Well, I guess the challenges we've had in the past are still the same challenges. Marriage equality, of course, is still a challenge. It's still something that needs to be worked on. Aging issues. Economic issues, health issues. Fortunately, Clarke and I haven't had to deal with those health issues, issues like AIDS and so forth. But many people do have to deal with those issues. So I guess the issues are still the same. Maybe just a different level or something. I'm not sure. The Mennonite Church still has policy against gays, although there are many, many congregations that are open and affirming, just like most denominations, but there's still an official policy against gays. So the same old issues are still there, I think. Yeah.
Did you have anything you wanted to add?
No. I mean, the same issues are there, but we've come a long way.
Sure have.
I would
Sure
have
have.
never believed they'd be considering gay marriage in my lifetime, but I couldn't have imagined it.
Early on, did you even imagine gay marriage being on the list?
No. It's something I never thought about because it was so far removed from reality. Now it's not. I mean, we still have a way to go. It's not that far now. It's within sight.
Is that something you'd ever consider? And if you don't want to answer, you don't have to.
We've discussed it, and if we would consider it, simply be for economic reasons, because I don't think a legal document has any bearing on our relationship, other than for practical economic reasons, basically.
And that would impact you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Definitely would. So for that reason, I hope that there is marriage equality, not just for us, but for everybody, really. Yeah.
What have been the most important events in your life?
Meeting Clarke. We always argue who rescued each other most. I always say, I rescued you, and he says, no, you rescued me. So I think we're equal. I think that's the verdict. Yeah.
Are there other events, other important events? Or turning points?
Well, that actually is the most important one. What else? I have to think for a while. What about you? Meeting me, right?
Turning points, yeah. Of course.
This is why we wanted to get you separate.
Right.
So we don't have to say what the other one wants to hear.
Yeah,
No, but it is
turning
true
points.
for me. Even if you weren't here, I'd say that.
Trying to think
what
of turning
else?
points.
Of course, for me, moving to Lancaster from Harrisburg, moving back to my roots, basically, that was a turning point, a good turning point.
Coming out was a major turning point because it ultimately reduced a lot of anxiety. Yeah.
And for
Not
you,
initially, but all of the way.
There goes that clock again.
Yeah.
Very loud and annoying.
so coming out, what do you define as coming out for yourself? Because it's
Just for me, coming out was just coming to grips with my sexuality.
so it was more a personal thing
Yes.
than actually
Yeah,
saying.
right. Yeah, I should define that. And when that happened, it initially depressed me for quite a few years. But I eventually got over that.
And you just felt that, was that by yourself, or how did you get through that?
Just by myself.
And was that before you started going out at all, or meeting
No,
anyone
during that time.
when you were sitting in the car?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, even after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a hard one for you. Do you have any books, music, or objects of particular significance?
Well, of course, for Clarke, I shouldn't talk for him, but this whole house being like a museum of Mennonite history, that's hugely important to him. So I've been sort of riding on his coattails, and that became hugely important to me as well. I'm interested in Mennonite history and family history because he's interested in it. His enthusiasm rubbed off on me more so than my enthusiasm has rubbed off on him. Although they have to a certain extent. So, I'm very much interested in Lancaster County history and Mennonite folk culture, Amish folk culture, and all the artifacts that go along with that.
Did you? Are there any objects? This house, I think, is an object.
Yeah,
that might-
it is. And as far as buying the house was sort of a life-changing event because it consumed so much energy and money. But, I would have been doing a lot more traveling if I hadn't bought this place. But it gave me the perfect place to collect, which was what I wanted to do. So I certainly don't regret it. But my collections, the things I value most are the family things. And I have lots of those sorts of things because I bought them at all the older families' auctions, starting when I was 12. So my siblings weren't that interested in any of that stuff. So even up until my mother passed away 2.5 years ago, and we had sales for her things, and basically I bought all the family things except for a couple pieces that I knew a nephew or niece were interested in.
with your interest in history, do you have any thoughts or things that speak to you as being gay history? What in Lancaster?
Well, of course, there's Charles DeMuth, he's an important icon, and maybe there's President Buchanan, who knows. Maybe there's the Landis brothers.
Now, who are the Landis brothers?
Oh, Landis Valley Museum. There's always been the question, were they gay? Was one of them gay? Who knows? I'm not sure. I think they were kindred spirits, whatever that means, I do not know. But
Can you tell a little bit about their story, why people might think things?
they were bachelor brothers who were collectors, just like Clarke is a bachelor, he was a collector. And they were married, collected antiques. So there's no documentary evidence, but maybe they're part of the story, maybe they're not. Maybe
Thaddeus Stevens, maybe?
yeah, maybe Thaddeus Stevens.
Another bachelor.
Yeah. So I guess it's like every community. There are stories of LGBT people here that are surrounded by mystery. So
Hopefully you can, in this process, find a few old timers. We're not that old, actually.
we're getting there.
And hopefully there's a few around, because I used to know some, but they're mostly gone. But, you know, Lancaster had a few gay spots long before the Tally Ho. I understand that's long before my time, but hopefully somebody's still around to, record that history.
Yeah, I don't know. Have you ever seen the 1913 Vice Commission report?
No.
It's our 100th anniversary.
Yeah, I've seen it. I mean, I don't have it. Yeah.
Because that does mention the word, I think, fairies.
Oh, is that right?
Right. And Water Street even then was
Yeah,
kind
I
of
know.
prostitution and...
There was just a copy of that sold on eBay
Really?
the other week. I underbid it. I should have. Nobody bid on it. I should have bid higher. There was one other bidder, and they got it.
That is so funny, because just this past week I was thinking I ought to put that as a notice on eBay because
Really?
no one ever came up.
It's the first time I've ever seen it.
It used
on
to
that.
be, they had an issue at the library, and now they have a copy. You don't see the actual
Oh,
issue, but in
okay.
the reference room there is.
I've never looked at it. Ha ha.
Yeah, it's 100th anniversary
Yeah,
this year.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
That's why I thought if I bought it, I was going to email Jack Brubaker and remind him it's 100th anniversary of the Vice report. Lancaster was a wild place, according to
To the
the
what?
pages they photographed in the eBay listing.
So you have never seen that?
No,
Oh.
never seen.
We should take a ride to the library.
Yeah, I wasn't even aware of it before I saw that eBay.
Well, there was a book about DeMuth and another painter, and it's called I Speak for Vice, because apparently he told someone on a train back to Lancaster that he was coming back to speak for Vice, because there was this private citizen group that was doing this Vice Commission.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Great.
Well, and where do you think gay people were back then, or lesbian people? I mean, and I'm kind of leading with this. You once said something about, thought you had about Fraktur
Mm-hmm.
artists.
That's
Yeah.
my theory.
Yeah.
Oh, that's you.
Well,
That's always
I guess my theory is that nothing changes under the sun. You know, an LGBT community is different now, but there are always LGBT people. The question is, who were they in the 1800s and 1900s in the Mennonite community? Were they the bachelor artists, like they sometimes are now? And I think one answer is maybe they were the bachelor artists. The bachelor artists who were schoolmasters, who were doing some of the greatest Fraktur in Pennsylvania German culture. You know, some of the best Fraktur, some of the most sought after Fraktur was done by bachelor schoolmasters who were very artistic, had excellent Fraktur penmanship, who were very skilled, who had fine sense of design, who probably liked to collect antiques, who knows what. But so I think it's no surprise that bachelor schoolmasters were some of the best artists back then in the Mennonite community. It doesn't surprise me anyway. Of course, there's no documentation saying
I was
my
gonna
boyfriend.
say, show me your documentation.
There's no documentation. So, there's no diaries where they write about their partners. But it's just my historic gaydar in action. So.
Just like your future gaydar worked with your nephew there.
You're right. His gaydar is overly active.
No, I think it's very accurate. I think it's very accurate. I was an artistic schoolmaster. I didn't do Proctor, but if I had been living in 1800s and 1900s, I would be an artistic bachelor schoolmaster gay guy doing Proctor.
Right.
So,
Undoubtedly.
yep. I'd probably be lousy at it, but I'd be doing it.
Is there anything else that we've missed or that you...
You covered a lot of territory. Can't think of anything.
No.
Yeah.
We didn't talk too much about the potluck, but
Yeah.
that was another group that I know you hosted some.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you want to...
That was a major social outlet for gay men in this area in the 80s and 90s, where we
Late 80s.
yeah, where we'd meet. How often was it? Once a month there for a while. Once every couple months.
Once a month.
Was it once a month?
Yeah, once a month.
And we would often host the Christmas one. And
Yeah.
would we host it more than that? I forget.
Oh yeah, we did.
Yeah. So that's a whole story in itself, but that was an important way to meet people, important way to keep in contact with people.
Not always people we wanted to meet, but
Yeah, it's true. If you open your doors to everybody, you would open
That's
them to
right.
everybody. But fortunately, we never had any trouble here.
no, we did not.
Nobody ever stole anything or
And,
spilled
and that was
drinks.
a men's group, right? That
Yes.
was originally.
It was
Yeah.
men's.
Then it
spotlight.
became men and women. I forget the name of it.
Oh, did it?
At the end, I think.
But yeah, that was important. Social outlet.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. You do finish my sentences.
There you go.
So, are there any other people you're thinking we should definitely talk to that I know we talked about some before. Like when you mention old timers, are there any names that...
Al.
Al.
Sherry and Al.
Oh yeah. Was he in this area for
Was
some
he in
time?
Lancaster? Or was he in Harrisburg?
Yeah. Ask
He's
Tony about.
considerably
Yeah.
older.
Yeah. Ask Tony about Al. Yeah. Of Jerry and Al.
Jerry.
I wish we had Ferg Dormer. I was thinking, oh, Ferg could tell us stories.
Oh, for
Yeah.
right. But he wasn't from around here, I don't think.
He was around here long enough that I
Was
think
he?
he had some
Okay.
insight
Because he had
into
a
where to
Jersey
find things.
accent or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, he did. He went back to Jersey. Art, can I ask one question?
Sure.
As you're aging, have you had legal documents drawn up to care for one another? Have you done a lot of preparations and those kind of things?
We have, yeah, and we've just updated things, revised things, try to cover all the bases and keep things legal and paperwork all taken care of, and I think we've covered all the bases with all that stuff.
Well, I have. I don't know
Yeah.
that you have.
Yeah.
But I'm the one with the health issues.
Yeah.
So you're my medical power of attorney.
Yeah. Clarke has been diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, which explains walking with a cane and so forth. So, we've been extra conscious of those sort of things.
And have you had conversations then with family about what you want in terms of each of you for your lives? What kinds of plans you have for the future as you're aging and things?
Yeah, it's all written down and it's on paper.
Well,
basically.
yeah, I haven't had that many discussions with my family. I mean, they're aware of the situation.
Yeah. As far as legal documents and so forth, everything's all taken
Yeah,
care of.
my sister's my executor
Yeah.
in Lee,
Yeah.
and I talked to her about that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I see.
So-
And I have a living will, and
Yeah.
I have medical directive and those sorts of things.
Yeah, 'cause it's true. The older you get, especially in this community, it's important to have everything documented and legalized, and
Yeah,
that's for
Well,
sure.
in creating a path for yourselves, so as health changes go on, sometimes people think about, am I going to have to find a healthcare facility? How do I pick
Right.
one out, even under best of circumstances? But what do you do in terms of orientation and things
Yeah.
like that?
Yeah, it's a complicated field. But no, it is. Fortunately, in my family, with my siblings, who are older than I am, it's all worked out well for them as far as care either from their family or in the retirement community or whatever. And,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm assuming everything's going to be okay with us too.
Okay,
So,
good. Good.
Has that been I guess along that line, earlier you said you had not really talked specifically about your relationship with anyone in your family. So
Right.
does that include, how do you deal with the executive question and talking to
Well-
your sister about that?
I haven't talked directly about it, but they're certainly aware of it.
Okay.
I think after I was diagnosed, I think there were some emails going around among the family that I, didn't receive. But I know my aunt in Indiana sent me a note
mhm.
that kind of hinted that she knew what was going on. I thought,
She was
well,
at a
she
distance.
knows what's going on. She's 85 and, and was saying she doesn't believe in judging, Her father, or her late husband was a Mennonite pastor, great guy. But I realized, well, there's been a lot of discussion here that I haven't been party to. So I think everybody in my family knows at this point.
And we've been going out of our way to do things like make his family feel more welcome here.
Mm-hmm.
Because, in the past, of course they worked together all the time, his family, so they didn't really socialize that much except for
Right.
official things with the mother and and his parents. So we never really socialized that much, or I never really socialized that much either. They didn't invite each other to each other's houses, so we didn't either. But that's been happening more because, we want them to be involved in their future. So, and we want them to feel welcome to come here anytime. So,
It's still easier for anybody that has reservations about gay people to not have to discuss it. They can accept it, and
It's changed a great deal.
I don't feel that I need to discuss it with them.
Sit
And
down with each brother
apparently
and
they
sister.
don't either because they don't bring it up to me, and that's fine.
well, it's
And
different.
some people need to discuss it, and I respect that. And I've had friends that said that was the biggest mistake they ever made, was actually discussing it with a family member.
I think it depends on your personality. Each person's
Well,
personality
it's all
is different.
different situations.
Each family's dynamics is different. So what works for one family might not be best for another family. But
That's one thing that I hope has changed. When we first came out, it was often you'd meet somebody and they'd say, my parents found out I was gay, and I haven't spoken to them in 10 years,
yeah,
literally.
I'll bet that
Or
is
my mother
decreased.
kicked me out of the house.
Yeah,
You'd hear that all the time.
yeah,
And
I'll bet
I-
that's decreased.
I hope that
Yeah,
doesn't happen.
I think it
like
has
that.
decreased. Yeah. I'll bet it has. With each generation that happens.
I would
that's
think
all.
so.
Yeah.
But I thought, how sad to
Yeah, right,
cut off
right.
your relationship. Had a friend in Pittsburgh, and it had been, this was 1983, for it had been almost 10 years since he spoke to his parents. Because he was in college and confided in his best friend, and they told his parents.
Yeah.
And had a big argument, and that was it.
That would never happen in my family because although my family's Mennonite, or my parents had been Mennonite, their relationship with their children trumps everything. So there would be nothing I could tell them about my relationship or my sexuality that would create that kind of conflict. And I'm sure that's the case with your
But
family.
they still don't want to discuss it. Your
Um,
mother does not.
well, she's 100, so
But
she doesn't want to talk to anybody about
discuss
sex.
it.
I don't know, she's not wearing cover anymore.
She asks about Clarke all the time. She can remember that. So yeah, things definitely have changed for the better.
Okay. You feel like you said everything you need to say?
He's never done talking.
That's not
How
true.
many hours do you have,
That's true.
Mark?
I don't have anything else.
No, this was great. Thank you so much.
I'm glad
Sure.